Desiree, text me the address,
Good.
please.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining. Very excited for everybody to be here tonight. Thank you all for attending. My name is Dr. Marion McNabb, and I am the president of the Cannabis Center of Excellence. The Cannabis Center of Excellence is a virtual nonprofit organization that brings together citizens, medical patients, academics, researchers, community members, healthcare professionals, policymakers, and the cannabis industry to drive change in access together. We do this by online and in-person collaborative innovative research programs. So thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I'm really excited for this event and hand it over to my colleague Glorya to explain a little bit more about what we'll be doing tonight.
Thanks, Marion. Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy that you got a chance to come in. I just wanted to share that this is the second of 3 events that COE will be hosting this fall. And these events are sponsored by High Profile Bodega. Tonight's event will be discussing local cannabis research. There is going to be one more event, which is an in-person event that will be held right in the Dorchester area. And so stay tuned. We have all the information available for you. And yes, it's going to be open house. It's going to be networking, and it's going to be fun. Looking forward to seeing you then. And Desiree, you want to share a little something?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm really excited to be able to present to you today. Dr. Marion McNabb is amazing and has a great presentation ready for you guys. But first, I want to thank the financial sponsor, High Profile Bodega. It's a Boston-based cannabis retail company opening 3 retail dispensaries in the city of Boston. The event tonight will be recorded and we will make it available online on the Cannabis Center for Excellence website. And this is the first of 3 events held this fall. Last month, we had an event called Cannabis 101, which talked a little bit about the history of cannabis, the plant itself, and the different methods of consumption for people interested in cannabis. So I look forward to chatting with you guys after the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for being here. So we'll be going through a pre-recorded presentation about some of the cannabis data trends in the last 4 years in Massachusetts and nationally. So if everybody could mute themselves during the presentation, that would be great. Then we will come back together in about 45 minutes in a live discussion about the research findings and how they impact us in our communities and from our various perspectives, and also be able to take some questions from the audience. So thank you all so much for being here, and we'll take it away. In the meantime, while Vanessa's queuing up the video, I do want to thank High Profile Bodega for the support for this event series. It's been a really great experience trying to learn from a variety of perspectives about cannabis and the Canna-Curious. So as the presentation gets queued up, here we go. I'll see you all in a little bit. I'm very excited to be here today. My name is Dr. Marion McNabb, and I'm the president of the Cannabis Center of Excellence. I'm excited tonight to talk about cannabis data trends that we've seen since 2018 and what's relevant here in Massachusetts now in 2021. So let's get started. First, I'd like to thank our sponsor for tonight's event, High Profile Bodega. They're a cannabis shop opening up in Massachusetts. So thank you for your support and encouragement to raise awareness through cannabis education. So tonight I'll be covering some very interesting topics, really understanding what some of the research trends and data trends that we've seen from studies that I've been the principal investigator of together with colleagues since 2018. So I'll start with this presentation tonight, and then we'll conclude, and then we'll have a nice fireside chat with 4 women leaders to discuss the implications of these research findings in our own communities. So let's get started by getting to know each other a little bit. So if you can go ahead and take out your phone and open up your camera and scan this QR code, it'll take you to a survey. And let's just take a couple of minutes to fill out and answer a few questions, and we'll be presenting these results right after my presentation. So it's asking what state I reside in, how many years I've been working in the cannabis industry, and whether or not that's applicable. It's also asking if I know anyone who has lost their life due to opioids or addiction. And it's asking what my interest is here today for this presentation. So I've just submitted my response, and I'll give everybody just one more second to go ahead and scan and fill out the survey. And I think you'll be interested in the results. So tonight I'm going to cover very quickly the history and the state of the cannabis industry in Massachusetts, and then talk a little bit about the journey of myself and colleagues in conducting community-based cannabis research studies since 2018. And then I'll highlight some data trends that we've seen, understanding cannabis customers and patients, and then leave us all with a call to action. So one of my big questions is, how well do we all know the profile of cannabis consumers and medical patients in Massachusetts? And hopefully by the end of this presentation, we'll understand a little bit more about who the consumers and patients are in the Commonwealth. So let's understand a little bit more about the history of adult use cannabis and the timeline of that in Massachusetts. So in 2016, 54% of Massachusetts voters approved question 4, legalizing adult use. In 2017, an advisory board was established and the Cannabis Control Commission was established. In 2018, the first round of adult use regulations were approved. The Economic Empowerment Program was started, and the first social equity training cohort was launched. In 2021, here we are with billions in adult use sales to date, and what is now a growing and emerging industry here in the Commonwealth. Here in 2021 alone, we can see 755 million in adult use cannabis sales in this year alone. And prized retail locations are commanding prices of millions of dollars here in the Commonwealth. But what's important for us also to understand is that cannabis research has been stalled over the last several decades due to the federal scheduling of cannabis as a Schedule I illegal drug, narcotic. And this therefore has prevented researchers and academic institutions from really accessing cannabis easily and efficiently to study its health effects and benefits. In fact, a recent article that came out last year has noted that over a nearly 20-year period, the US government, under the National Institute of Drug Abuse, has invested $1 billion in cannabis research funding that is designed to show the harms related to cannabis. But there has not been a lot of funding opportunities or support available to study a balanced and neutral research agenda related to cannabis. In the United States, that is. Yet, cannabis research is thriving in other countries, including Israel and Canada, and some US states have taken the lead initiative to start cannabis research statewide programs that are funded through adult use profits or other funding mechanisms. As we always hear, we still need more research, but what we really need is research in human populations in the United States, where there's so much we have the potential to unlock, and other countries are finding other milestones. So why can't we continue to advocate and work towards this here in the United States and in Massachusetts? So in 2017, I started together with Randall McCaffrey, Cannabis Community Care and Research Network, a company that was formed to advocate and work towards cannabis research, education, and social justice. So for the next few minutes, I'll talk about a journey, a 5-year journey from C3RN to the Cannabis Center of Excellence, which I am now the president of. Back in 2016, when we formed C3RN, The Health and Health Effects of Cannabis State of the Evidence and Recommendations for Research report was published by the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. We used this as a baseline for what areas to study in cannabis research moving forward. This was a systematic literature review that looked at over 10,000 articles published in the scientific literature about the medical value or the risks and benefits of cannabis, and provided a state of the evidence on different health conditions and also recommendations for overcoming the research challenges and barriers that I spoke of earlier. So for the last 5 years, all of the work has been based on these initial recommendations. In 2017, C3RN started by advocating and writing public testimony in 3 main areas as the Commonwealth was establishing the adult use industry here for cannabis. We worked on cannabis research, education, and social justice. We did this through a variety of mechanisms. We attended public testimony, we submitted writing and public policy recommendations. We attended local events such as the one up in the picture up in this top right, which was us advocating at Lawrence City Council, all the way down to all over the Commonwealth, north, south, east, and west. We submitted over 300 pages of academic public testimony and writing for research, education, and social justice. In 2017, we submitted our idea to create a virtual cannabis center of excellence to the Boston University and Green Lion Partners Cannabis Startup Competition. And we won the first year to do that, to create what I now run, which is a virtual cannabis center of excellence. Our thought was by leveraging the cannabis industry, the academic community, the policy community, consumers and patients, that we could all bring our respective strengths and approaches and data and information and education to address key issues that we face today from a health perspective, but also to continue to advance the research and education around the role of cannabis. After winning this competition 5 years later, still several works have been conducted as a result of that, contributing to the Cannabis Center of Excellence. In 2018, the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth reached out and invited us to join in on what's now a 4-year running relationship where we have conducted now 6 different research studies related to medical and adult use cannabis in the Commonwealth and beyond. Our first study was the 2018 Cannabis Consumer and Patient Study, where we surveyed nationally over 2,000 respondents about how, from an adult use and a medical perspective, how they consume cannabis, what benefits are they seeing, what health effects do they see, what side effects, what risks and what benefits. This was a very powerful study in the sense that in 1 year, we were able to really understand why people, just a baseline about all the different health conditions and symptoms and rationale for adult use consumption. In 2018, we then used this data to host 6 different events where we shared results and findings and brought leading experts around to understand the information that we were seeing. Our topics focused on medical use cannabis, adult use cannabis, social justice, opiate addiction, and environmental justice. You can see a lot of those videos. We'll be uploading more on the COE YouTube page in the coming days. But what we also did was partnered with the industry, the cannabis industry, to help fund these research studies, but also get the word back out to the patients and the consumers that filled out the survey, their results. I'm a public health doctor by training that really is engaged in community-based participatory research methods. And we decided to implement this type of approach when implementing our cannabis research studies here in the Commonwealth. So with our study partners, we analyzed the results that they helped us collect. And then we went back to the cannabis dispensaries and we held patient and consumer education days where we then shared stories of
Good.
impact
Oh, no,
and
no.
met those who filled out our survey
But I
and
can't
continue
see
to
her. You can see
drive
her?
the education
Oh,
forward.
no, you can't see.
We also use this information in various political meetings to help drive policy recommendations to improve access and reach. In 2019, C3RN was also selected and hired by the Cannabis Control Commission to become a social equity training vendor in the first year of its training program. So we utilized information and data from our studies and worked with several colleagues in the field to conduct 11 courses for the first in the nation statewide social equity training program here in the Commonwealth. In 2019, leading veteran advocate, colleague, and dear friend, Stephen Mandile, reached out in response to our consumer and patient study and felt that it would be an important introduction to conduct a veterans health and medical cannabis study, and that could have impact on a specific population that suffers from unique health conditions and symptoms and really holds a lot of potential to benefit from medical cannabis. So in 2019, together with Stephen Mandile, C3RN, UMass Dartmouth, and Joint Venture & Co., we launched the Veterans Health and Medical Cannabis Study. This study collected data from 545 veterans and lasted until the end of December 2019. And we have since produced several publications based on the results that you can see. First, I'd like to thank those 565 veterans that participated in this research study and all of the partners that supported financially our work to make that research study and the Cannabis Advancement Series possible. So, like we did in 2018, in 2019, we launched the Cannabis Advancement Series together with Joint Venture & Co., Stephen Mandile, and UMass Dartmouth. For this series, educational series, we analyzed data and presented results from the Veterans Health and Medical Cannabis Study at 6 different events where we brought veterans, policymakers, regulators, researchers, and clinicians together to discuss the barriers that veterans faced and how we could improve access based on the findings that we were seeing. This is a very successful event series, and all of the recordings are available online. And I highly recommend watching some of these results and some of the events that were conducted on different topics related to veterans access. We had colleagues such as Dr. Sue Sicily here, who's a leading veteran researcher, to Commissioner Hoffman at the Cannabis Control Commission in Massachusetts, and several other policymakers, researchers, educators, clinicians, veterans, community members, and leaders participate. Thank you to everybody who made that advancement series a success. One of those was Dr. Peter Grinspoon and Dr. Lester Grinspoon, of which Stephen Mandile introduced us to back in 2018. Dr. Lester Grinspoon, rest in power, was an American psychiatrist and standing associate professor of psychiatry at Harvard, who was groundbreaking in the area of studying social policy of cannabis, psychedelics, and other drugs, and for his commitment to changing harmful drug policies. I was very honored to interview Dr. Grinspoon before he passed, and his son, Dr. Peter Grinspoon, and daughter-in-law, Dr. Liz Grinspoon, I'm very honored to serve as cannabis research advisors to the Cannabis Center of Excellence and advise on ongoing research studies. Thank you, Dr. Lester Grinspoon, for your leadership, and rest in peace. The veterans study that we worked on the data is still being put to good use. Part of what we did under Stephen Mandile's leadership was pose 2 bills in the Massachusetts legislature over the last few years that would work to advance access to veterans having medical cannabis cards that using their VA paperwork. This is a model that has been demonstrated in several other United States to be working to reduce the barriers to access to medical cannabis for veterans. In fact, one of the largest barriers that we found in our Veterans Health and Medical Cannabis study was the cost of money to obtain a medical cannabis card for veterans. And so Thus, our data collected through the study is being immediately put into policy action to remove some of those barriers. The data from the 2019 Veterans Health and Medical Cannabis Study was also a core part of the forming of a new magazine called Cannabis Patient Care, where a sub-analysis of the research results that looked at post-traumatic stress, from post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth, and how medical cannabis can play a role in the treatment of PTSD among veterans, was published in November of 2020. And quarterly, this magazine now publishes free patient education and healthcare provider education publications quarterly around different health topics. So I highly recommend checking this out. In 2021, that data is still being used. And earlier this year, I was able to conduct a presentation for continuing medical education credit at the Patients Out of Time conference virtually, where over 400 clinicians were trained and updated on their clinical knowledge based on those research findings. In 2020, when COVID hit, C3RN and now the Cannabis Center of Excellence launched, together with UMass Dartmouth, the COVID-19 and Medical Cannabis and Adult Use Consumer Impact Study. This study was launched on May 2020 and lasted until August of this year, asking whether or not how COVID has impacted adult use cannabis consumers and patients nationwide and in the Commonwealth. In December of 2020, the Center of Excellence hosted a 3-hour-long event inviting 6 leading researchers, healthcare providers, patients, and others, cannabis industry experts, to present their thoughts and views about cannabis and its role in COVID, both from a prevention and mitigation standpoint. This event you can find recorded on the Cannabis Center of Excellence YouTube page, and I highly recommend going to check it out. There was very interesting research findings shared during that event. This study and the results from the COVID study was also presented at the Patients Out of Time conference earlier this year, training over 400 healthcare providers on the role of cannabis and the impact that COVID had on and continues to have on consumers and patients. Now, after all those research studies conducted since 2017, what have we seen? Well, in general, when we started in 2018, the number one problem that health condition that cannabis consumers and patients reported finding cannabis most helpful for was chronic pain. In fact, in the veterans study, it was also chronic pain. However, now when we see COVID and the increase of COVID, we see that now more and more, many consumers and patients are reporting anxiety and depression as their top health conditions for consuming cannabis, and chronic pain moving less. Now, if we pay attention to the colors here, one important note is post-traumatic stress disorder. And the blue line, which is veterans are disproportionately impacted by PTSD. And this is important because PTSD, there's a lot of, we need to really understand the role of different cannabis strains and different cultivars on different health conditions and how they impact. So it's important to understand the nuances of all the different populations and consumers and patients that we're serving through our dispensaries or outlets. When we look at the primary symptoms for which people were consuming medical or adult use cannabis for over the last, since 2018, we can see that sleep is rising as our number one reason that people, insomnia is the number one reason that people are choosing medical cannabis. And now again, with COVID, anxiety being the second, and then pain being the third. Now, symptoms including depression, inflammation, headaches, spasms, attention, and aggression are also being reported to have medical cannabis to find relief from. When we look at how much money are cannabis consumers and patients spending each week to get these reliefs that I just spoke about, Well, we can see that the cost has gone down since 2018 from $87 a week to now $80 a week in the COVID study. However, that's a lot of money per week for something that is showing to provide relief, but is not covered by any kind of insurance and is an out-of-pocket cost. Well, what are we looking at when we're talking about how do our patients and consumers consume cannabis? By and large, the patients and consumers in our studies report preferring to consume flower, then followed by vapes and edibles. But what's very interesting to note is the COVID-19 pandemic has shifted in terms of consumption methods. So we can see that smoking flower has gone up, edibles are more common with the red bar, but vape cartridges have gone down. And that might also have been an impact from the recent vape EVALI crisis as well. One of the most striking findings in our research studies to date is the use of medical cannabis to reduce the use of prescription or over-the-counter medications. This is anywhere between 50 and 76% of the people in our research studies, and they report anything from over-the-counter medications, opioids, antidepressants, muscle relaxants, benzos, mood stabilizers, and other medication reduction with the help of medical cannabis as an alternative. When we ask, what are some barriers do you have to consuming cannabis? Among the most top and consistent barrier is money, and then followed by access to the right products. As I mentioned, medical cannabis or cannabis is currently an out-of-pocket expense, and the cost of it through an adult use, you're paying sales tax, and you're also paying potentially higher fees for the product. If you're a medical patient, then you don't have to pay sales tax and potentially can have larger quantities. However, money being a big barrier, it's important for us to think about on the medical use side where we can offer discounts for those people who have disabilities, or if we can continue to work on areas of health insurance coverage in the future. Again, one of the most striking findings we have found over the last several years in conducting cannabis research studies is the role that medical cannabis plays as a non-lethal harm reduction. By and large, the respondents in our report and our studies report cannabis helps with psychological symptoms, with physical symptoms, helps them avoid the use of, avoid starting other medications, including opiates, helps reduce prior medications that are non-opiate, helps reduce the use of alcohol, opiates, and tobacco use. And we can see in the COVID study, more and more are choosing medical cannabis to reduce the use of alcohol and tobacco. This, from a public health perspective, should be considered as a potential tool in the public health harm reduction toolkit. So in sum, we have seen over the last few years of our research studies that cannabis has had a positive impact on the quality of life and has been shown to support consumers and patients to reduce unhealthy behaviors or medications that they don't want to be using anymore. We have seen that anxiety has crept up over the years, especially due to COVID, as one of the top conditions that people are choosing medical or adult use cannabis for. Veterans are using medical cannabis to relieve them and having a much better quality of life, and using opiates much less now. Based on all of these research findings, we have learned over the years and in these studies that while patients and consumers are consuming cannabis for a variety of health conditions and symptoms, that by and large, our healthcare provider audience is largely unaware of the value and the potential role and the state of the evidence related to medical cannabis. And this is due to the fact that cannabis has been systematically removed from medical education and there's been a stalling and inability to really scale up cannabis research studies here in the United States over the last few decades due to the federal prohibition. Earlier this year, CanMed and Medicinal Genomics, the Cannabis Center of Excellence, teamed up and launched the Healthcare Provider Knowledge, Attitude, and Practices Study related to medical cannabis. This study, ongoing until August 2022 of next year, asks healthcare providers of any specialty, any walk of life in the United States or in Canada, what they know about medical cannabis, what they want to know about medical cannabis, and how they want to learn it. We intend to use this information and the data to help develop collaborative educational materials that are targeted at the desires and the needs of healthcare providers themselves and related to medical cannabis. So I'd like to thank the 15 different study co-investigators that are part of this research study. We really intended to ensure that we could look across health systems, including the National Indian Health System that provides services to Native Americans, to VA and veterans groups that look at veteran-specific issues. Also reaching out and collaborating and partnering with associations of clinicians of color to make sure that we are reaching all of those in need. And also understanding all the different specialties of healthcare providers that we could be reaching out to and collaborating with, from nursing to palliative care to doctors and chronic pain, et cetera. So again, I'd like to thank also the study partners that we have. The Center of Excellence funds our research work together with partnerships. And these are the study partners that have joined on for this healthcare provider study. We always welcome more, and we will be presenting these results at several national and international conferences, hopefully next year, but definitely on the national conferences. And we appreciate any financial support to help raise awareness and keep continuing to grow the study reach and awareness. So if you are a medical provider, please do take the survey. You'll be entered to win a lottery to go to CanMed, and also to win an Amazon gift card. So I would like to give a special thanks to Basque Dispensary in Fairhaven, Massachusetts, and to UMass Dartmouth for being our first and longest and ongoing supporters of cannabis research with the Cannabis Center of Excellence. We will not, with Erin and the CCOE studies. We very much appreciate all of our study partners, and specifically those that continue to help us grow and get the word out about our data and innovate. So speaking of, what do we need when we are trying to innovate in cannabis research? What have we learned over the last few years? Is it money that you need? Is it cannabis? Is it community or people? What do we need in the future to move forward with cannabis research and success? Well, what I want to do is remind us where we are here today and what are the most pressing public health issues of which cannabis has been shown to play a potential role. And that is the opioid epidemic. In addition to the opioid epidemic, the COVID-19 pandemic has been placing undue pressure on addiction and opioid overdoses. And we are seeing a rise and rise where now opioid overdoses in November of 2021 have surpassed all gun health and other public health issues as an ongoing crisis. In 2021, in the first month, 6 months alone in Massachusetts, more than 1,000 people died from fatal overdoses. And not only are these overdose deaths affecting populations that they have been affecting over the last couple of years, in the last 2 years, with the impact of COVID, we're seeing an increase in the rise of opioid overdoses and impacts among Black and non-Hispanic populations and Hispanic populations, in addition to the white counterparts. Although overdose deaths have risen among mass, we really need to understand that these fatal overdoses among Black men and women rose sharply, and among Latinx men have risen sharply in Massachusetts. And so understanding interventions for all populations that are impacted by opiate addiction, and then those that often face health inequities and disparities already. We need to understand the nuances and develop interventions that can meet all these different health groups. But what is really causing and driving these opioid overdoses these days? Fentanyl. We can see here at the top, fentanyl is rise to be the #1 reason, that the #1 drug present in opioid overdose deaths, particularly here in the Commonwealth. In fact, recently, from 2019, in the same period of data that we've conducted research studies, Massachusetts received $60 million in treatment addiction money. However, only 1 in 5 people right now with addiction to painkillers or illicit opiates receives evidence-based treatment. Now, I've shown that data that we've collected over that same time period is showing that cannabis consumers and patients are choosing medical cannabis as an alternative to opiates and other prescription substances. Medical cannabis has also been shown in the clinical literature to mitigate withdrawal symptoms, reduce the tolerance and possible prevention of mortality from opioid overdoses. In our studies, between 50 and 76% of the respondents use cannabis to reduce unwanted prescription medication, over-the-counter medication, or opiate use. This is a call to action that we have. There's a huge opioid overdose epidemic. COVID is making this situation worse. Our healthcare providers are largely unaware of the role that medical cannabis can play. We really need to educate our healthcare providers about this harm reduction alternative. So if you know anybody, please share the word, and we will develop educational materials based on this information to get the word out for our healthcare providers. Another way that the Cannabis Center of Excellence has worked to implement innovative and participatory methods to get the word out about this research study and about our findings in general is by launching the Cannabis Citizen Science Program. This is a program where people can sign up to be a volunteer and help us raise awareness about the medical cannabis and healthcare provider research study. What they do is get yard signs that we've printed out and help us go around the Commonwealth and place these yard signs, and in New England, around hospitals and healthcare centers and public land. And the sign asks the healthcare provider to take the survey and directs them to resources for information. So if you're interested in becoming a citizen scientist with us at the Cannabis Center of Excellence to raise awareness, please visit our website and we appreciate you. This is Kelly, our first and really leading cannabis citizen scientist. She discovered the value of medical cannabis in helping her reduce a multitude of pills and opiates, and now has raised significant awareness about our healthcare provider study and helped us quite significantly in the last couple of months since we've launched this program in late 2021. Another way that we've been working to get the word out about this information and about the role that medical cannabis can play as a substitute has been through several conference presentations. So over the last 3 months in 2021, I have attended 3 conferences. In September of 2021, I gave the keynote speech at NECAN in Boston. And at that keynote speech, I asked a similar survey that I asked of you all to fill out at the beginning of this webinar, which was asking how many people in the audience know someone directly who has been affected by the opioid epidemic or addiction. And 63% said yes. When I was in NECAN, New Jersey, I was giving a presentation about, this was in October of 2021, just last month. I asked a similar question of those that attended and responded to the survey at that presentation. In September 2021, 50% reported that they knew someone who had lost their life due to opiates or addiction. Just this past weekend on November 13th, 2021, I gave a presentation at the Harvest Cup Expo in Worcester. And I also asked 18 people who attended that survey, how many people knew someone who has died from addiction or opiates? And 83% of people said yes. Now, if these findings aren't striking to you, we need to do a better job of educating about why this data is important. With an ongoing opiate crisis, medical cannabis being shown as a non-lethal alternative, and in our research studies and our data, people are choosing medical cannabis as an alternative. This is an important area of education and research that we need to continue to explore. So what are the key takeaways? Both adult use consumers and medical patients alike are using cannabis to reduce medication use. Engaging citizens and patients in research using our citizen science program has shown not only allow to build trust, but also allow our citizen scientists to learn and be a part of this project. And we're having great benefits from people participating. In the majority of the studies that we've conducted over the last 4 years, consumers and patients consistently report finding their primary source of information about medical or adult use cannabis from Google searches, bud tenders at their local cannabis dispensaries, or the scientific literature, and not from their healthcare providers. Yet, we also find that respondents and patients in our studies report that they're using cannabis as a harm reduction alternative to reduce medication use, alcohol use, tobacco use, and find significant relief from psychological and physical symptoms on a variety of health conditions. So all in sum, we need to do a better work of now engaging our healthcare providers and educating our communities and continuing to raise awareness about the role that medical cannabis can play. And that's where we want to hear from you. If you know anybody that is addicted to alcohol, opioids, or other substances and wants to learn more about the role that medical cannabis can play, please scan here and sign up. We will be developing an ongoing educational program and platform and working to develop future research studies and programs that can aim to help those that are suffering learn more about the role that medical cannabis can play. So please sign up today, and we'll be in touch with more information, education, and resources moving forward. We're also launching the Opioid and Cannabis Awareness Project, where we're aiming to educate 150,000 people in the United States by the end of next year about the role that medical cannabis can play as an alternative. If you want to help us, we would really appreciate it. Please join our project. You can join as an individual, you can join as a company, and your support will help us develop ongoing educational materials, design programs where we can develop interventions around this and get more people the information about the role that medical cannabis can play as an alternative. We'll also give you data, dashboards, and reports back that will help you as an individual, you as a company, or you as someone who has a family member or a loved one who's struggling with addiction, or perhaps you yourself are struggling with addiction. We would love to develop and continue to help, and we hope that you will join our project so that we can continue to bring important information, education, and resources to the community based on the research findings that I've just presented and then what we've seen over the last 4 years in data trends. Another way that we're working to raise the awareness around the data that we've collected and the role that medical cannabis can play as an alternative is the Phoenix Art Project. I am also an artist, and one of the things in my prior to cannabis work career is I worked in HIV, and one of the most important aspects from a public education element that I remember in the HIV response was the AIDS quilt. So this project mirrors or mimics the AIDS quilt. And what it is I've worked over the last, and those 3 events that I spoke about, worked with different colleagues and friends to make pieces of art in honor of someone that they've lost due to the opioid epidemic or addiction. And these were all the pieces of art that have been made so far, fused into one piece. And I'll be taking this with me everywhere that I give presentations about this to show the human face and story that is associated behind the lives that we've lost, and retain their memory and understand the role that medical cannabis can play as a potential impact moving forward. So at the Cannabis Center of Excellence, we're excited to partner with different companies or groups that are interested in studying cannabis, medical cannabis and adult use cannabis, and the role that it can play. So reach out if you have a product or an idea that you want to study around cannabis or hemp in any human population in Massachusetts. Also, gotta give a plug and a shout out for a cannabis science fair that the Cannabis Center of Excellence, Boston University, and MCR Labs will be hosting on December 11th. We just selected the abstracts today, and we're really excited about all the innovations that will be showcased at the first annual Cannabis Science Fair. And we hope you join us in person for this free event at Boston University at the Build Lab. I'll also give a plug for another program that's launching this month at the Cannabis Center of Excellence that's focused on providing learning opportunities for those negatively impacted by the war on drugs. This is an apprentice program that the Cannabis Center of Excellence and Minorities for Medical Marijuana, Massachusetts, are launching this month. And it will be providing paid, mentored, on-site training opportunities for those negatively impacted by the war on drugs with regulated cannabis businesses in the Commonwealth. These are part-time opportunities. We're starting in cannabis retail, and we'll be expanding to delivery, cultivation, manufacturing, and more in the coming months. Our first partner is DDM Cannabis, and we're very excited to place our first candidate, apprentice candidate, this month with DDM. She's a nurse, and the project will be working on developing educational materials for cannabis consumers. Again, I'd like to give another special shout out and thanks to our longstanding research partners and education partners, BASC and UMass Dartmouth, providing support and partnership with us since 2018. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to that talk and the data trends. Now, let's have a look at the results of the All right, everybody. Good evening. Thank you so much for listening in on that presentation. Now, I'm going to transition into the second part of this event and welcome the beautiful women of the Fireside Chat, and Vanessa, if she's around. So I will, you've already heard from me now. I'm going to hand it over to Desiree to give a background about herself, and then the rest of the women to introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm really excited to be part of this educational series. My vision behind it was really based on educating the communities in Boston. Having gone to so many meetings and seeing people really fight hard against cannabis, all the while I knew about the health benefits and how it can actually impact our communities in a positive way, really inspired me to kind of put this material together to help educate people about cannabis, its healing benefits, the different ways of consumption, since there's a lot of stigma around having cannabis being smoked. And the truth is that, you know, the industry has grown enough to offer a variety of products that don't have to be smoked in order for you to receive the medicinal benefits. And along with this research, I really wanted to have this research accessible to my community. I think we need it. I think, you know, we're going to see more of it as the time comes. And I really hope that you guys enjoyed the presentation. I'll pass it on to Erin, who's the registered nurse on our team. Erin.
Hi, thanks, Des. I'm happy to be here. Thank you, Doc, for doing such a fabulous job as always. I've been in the healthcare industry for over 20 years, and I started my interest in cannabis actually in 2004, when my fiance was diagnosed with cancer at 28 years old. And I was in probably maybe my third or fourth month of nursing school. And along that long trip of school and along that long trip of his chemo and his demise, I don't want to say realized, but I felt the impact of cannabis improve, not save, but improve his quality of life versus the fentanyl patches that were on his body and the oxys that were prescribed every day that were making him irritated and just not himself. And that is when, after he passed away, is when I started my not my interest, but my clinical interest in trying to combine my medical experience into my cannabis, my love for cannabis. So since then, I've started cultivating. I think I've helped a lot of different patients from a lot of different backgrounds be able to make the transition from prescription meds that are being prescribed at the bedside to holistic plant meds. And it just makes me really fulfilled. I feel very, very filled as a healthcare worker now. And I'm really happy to be able to share my story with you guys and help any patients that are nervous or scared or need a little assistance or feel as though they need a little bit of medical background or advice or care planning along the way to make the transition easier. I'm happy to be here to help you guys.
Thank you, Erin, and thanks for your work, and thanks for being here tonight and your leadership and friendship.
Thanks, Doc.
Glorya, let's turn to you, and very excited to be a part of this event tonight. I think you're on mute.
Hi there. I just wanted to go live on my Instagram because I have been talking about this, if this is okay with y'all. I hope all is well. I'm so excited to be here again for number 2. When I tell you this young lady, Miss Desiree, has worked hard on this project, and I would just like to offer you a whole heap of patience and gratitude for working as you have been for the last few years. Dr. Marion doing what you do, which is incredible. And Erin, just meeting you, the joy that you share and the hopefulness that you share. That presentation was incredible. Tell you a little bit about me. I started really indulging in marijuana the first time with my brother at 12 years old. And I remember that vividly. But how this whole situation with opioid addiction it peaked in my head was when I started going to school down by Albany Street off of Mass Ave, over there on the route that goes to the food pantry and the prison. And I was walking through Meth Mile. Then I began to work at Boston Healthcare for the Homeless in the kitchen, directly dealing with folks who were coming off of and going back onto Meth Mile, and having an opportunity to share with them for a few years, to feed them, to nurture them, to encourage them, and for them to do the same to me. I transitioned into more of a culinary instruction using food to heal, because what I did notice was a lot of people who had opioid addiction weren't known for eating well. Some of them may have actually been in situations where they had other health issues, weren't eating well. And so that's where my focus came in. And that's when I developed my little situation here called Go-Go Bites, where I just want to share the best practices that I find out and what we can share together on healing. And quite frankly, marijuana has been very helpful with me with having a pinched nerve. I used it this year to lose 50 pounds or more, moving past the pain, using certain strains for focus, some for stamina and movement. So that's me. I just want to encourage you all to continue to be open to the process and to be gentle with those who still find the stigmatism attached to the product. But this science, there are people who are investigating this all over the world, and they know the power in it. And I am grateful to be in the midst. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all ladies for being here. So let's have, before we dive in, and our colleague Vanessa Jones will be leading us through a couple of questions and moderation. And then we'll leave some time for a few of the audience question and answer. So if folks want to put any questions in the chat, we will get to them. But we asked at the beginning of this event for everybody who was able to see at that time to scan a survey. And we asked how many people know someone that has lost their life. And on this webinar, you can see that by and large, the far majority of folks on this specific webinar also know somebody that has lost their life due to addiction or opiates. So this is a problem for everybody on the call. And maybe we can start by having, Erin, that from your clinical perspective, you've seen a lot of patients really work through this. Maybe you can explain a little bit more about what you've seen from a patient perspective these days now in COVID when you're in the clinic.
Honestly, at the bedside, a lot of the buildings I work in, number one, they're federally funded. So cannabis is not able to be utilized within the building. So number two, as I am bringing in their medication, a lot of the patients will say, especially, the older, I would say that generation, like the 70s, they'd say, gosh, I wish I could take a little poke off a joint, put me to sleep. And I'm like, I wish I could give you a joint rather than this cup of 7 pills that I have to sit you up and give you 3 drinks to swallow down. And, I'm seeing, honestly, more than 5 or 10 years ago, that I don't want to say elderly, but that older generation that is more accepting to the cannabis and the edibles. And I, another dialysis. I see a lot in dialysis that the patients, they say, everyone has those little smokes, little vapes that they use. So a lot of the patients talk about it. one another. So that's like another place where education is really, really utilized and important.
Thank you, Erin, and thank you, ladies, for joining us. Go ahead, Glorya.
Well, that's how I started to get into baking with Bud. Was I had a friend of mine who began dialysis, and I started making them for her, and then it grew to a woman whose husband had had prostate cancer, and just to kind of, I guess, ease the pain. But what I did find out, which I just heard recently, was I had made some for someone who had MS and was epileptic. Found out that was not a good match. And then I think, right. And then Erin topped it off too. So just sharing that, you have to, talk to folks. This is an opportunity for you folks to ask questions. So if you decide that you want to do some type of edible, especially around the holidays, or you want to share as a gift, find out what strain or how it can be used to benefit them.
I feel as though patients feel more secure being able to talk to someone in the healthcare industry, not necessarily their PCP or their provider, but someone in the industry where they can go over their diagnoses, their history, and what meds they're on, to make sure there's no contradictions, and what side effects that those meds give. And also, when someone's switching over to cannabis, we need to know why they're looking to utilize it, like what they're looking to achieve. So all the same steps are taken as you would in traditional healthcare, as in prescribing meds, as like even with the follow-up. I want to check back with you in 2 weeks to see if you wanted an indica, and I'm going to give you an indica and I'm going to give you a flower. I want to see in 2 weeks. Is it helping you sleep? Are you groggy in the morning? Are you getting a cough? Are you getting dry throat? I want to check back and see. Maybe we need to change it up. And and then the edibles are really tough because everyone has a different metabolism. And I'm sure everyone's heard they're metabolized twice, the double bypass in the liver. That's why they last so long. And that's why they're tough with dialysis patients, because through the dialysis, you're losing your medication, right? As you would with a pill, same thing. So there's just so many different things that are involved. Like we were talking about the MS patients. You don't want to give them an edible if they're already unbalanced and having trouble walking. Why add to that? Why induce a fall if you don't have to? Exactly. But when you walk into if they wheel into a dispensary, is the bud tender going to say, hey, what's your diagnosis? Or what meds are you on? Or what are you looking to achieve? Probably
I've never had that experience.
Yeah, and I think you're bringing up a really, really important point, both of you, and the fact that we now need to continue this conversation and educate our healthcare providers about it, because this is such complex medicine, and we need healthcare providers and experts involved in this too. Desiree, I know that you recently did a little bit of research on and wrote a paper around the topic around cannabis and opioids.
Yes, doctor. I am actually taking a opioid crisis class at Northeastern University right now, and I've learned a lot of important things. And the main one is that the textbook I'm reading, when it comes to treatment, it highly focuses on the 3 medications that are currently approved by the FDA to treat opioid addiction. And they're all opioids themselves. There's a methadone, there's a buprenorphine, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, and naltrexone. And these were medicines that were made to fight opioid addiction, but they're made by the same companies that have produced a lot of the opioids that have gotten us into this issue before. So it's really interesting. What I've learned is that, cannabis isn't an alternative that's being offered for opioid addiction. I don't think it's the answer. I don't think it's the all knowing answer, the cannabis for opioid, but I think that it's worth considering as an alternative because it doesn't have the side effects, and because it can heal, it can help ease a lot of the reasons why people need the opioids to begin with, anxiety, pain, sleep. And so when I'm learning about this in the class, and I also live in Roxbury, which is the community most impacted by the opioid crisis. I wake up every day, I see the people in my community suffering, needing to have the methadone every day. So, I think that it's important that as a society, we explore other alternatives, that we're not just relying on a one medicine fix all approach. And so I don't know if it's possible, Vanessa, to bring the screen back to the COVID results and COVID and cannabis use results. But those numbers are astonishing. And Dr. McNabb, when I seen this research, a few months ago at NCAN, my jaw dropped, and looking at it again, it's still like, I'm still in awe at how many people need other forms of healing, need other forms of treatment, and the lack of it, because there's no research, because the regulations are being put in place. It's really a huge gap that I want to help close, and I'll bring this back to the citizens. I think we had a few questions on the chat about the citizens program. The citizens program is a great way for anyone who has a regular life, a regular 9-to-5, to sort of just contribute, even just sharing it with your friends. We all know people in the healthcare industry. I can, off the top of my head, think about 5 to 7 people that I know work in the healthcare industry. And so, being part of the getting this research is going to be crucial for our communities, because and I'll show you the book. This is the book. And when it says, is cannabis good for opioid addiction, it says currently there is not enough data to prove that cannabis is a potential alternative treatment for opioid addiction. So, I encourage you all to sign up to the citizens, to be a citizens for cannabis, and to just share that study with your friends. Because even if it's 7 people that that are in the healthcare industry that can fill this out, it's helping to gather the research we need to move forward in fighting the opioid crisis and having healthier communities. I mean, that's the goal.
Excellent. Great feedback, ladies. Definitely coming from the results, as well as the opioid epidemic, and as well as your guys' experience in research. Do you guys think that you guys can overdose, or anybody can overdose from cannabis?
Well, there's been no documented lethal overdose from cannabis. And I think, just to reiterate Desiree's point, that cannabis is not a end all be all, a cure all. This is a tool in the public health toolkit that we should consider. And back to Erin's point, of the importance of engaging with your healthcare provider and understanding, I think this is extremely important to do, and for the message to get out there that, complex, when you're dealing with polypharmacy and all these complex medications, there's all sorts of side effects and things that can happen. So it's really important to do this under the care of people that know that what they're doing. So I just want to throw that out there, that the Center of Excellence isn't saying, cannabis is going to address everything. It won't, but this is a tool in the public health toolkit.
And just, so I think that Mr. Richard Woodruff had a question on the chat. His question is, how about an example of what a citizen scientist could contribute from Denver?
Awesome. Well, yes, we should do this internationally. So if you sign up, then basically what we can do is I'll send you some PDFs. You can, right now we're still fundraising for additional partners to be able to produce more signs and mail them. But in the meantime, I can send you PDF flyers, you know, if you want to print them out and spread the word that way, or I could, you know, collaborate in a number of other ways. So just sign up and we'll reach out and provide options for how people can operate outside of the New England area.
Mr. Woodruff actually had a really good question as well to follow that up with. Do you see a way for us as citizen scientists to move our various states forward on issues such as providing cannabinoid and terpene profile on medical cannabis?
That is an extremely important point. And yes, anybody who can advocate in any state to add a cannabinoid and terpene profile to their labels, I think would be good. I see Erin nodding her head, yes. What do you think, Erin?
And if you could just let some of the people watching know what is cannabinoid and what is terpene.
The profile?
What is a cannabinoid and what is a terpene?
Yeah.
And then
The terpenes,
either of you, yeah, whoever wants to answer.
the terpenes provide the flavor, the smell, the taste, but also provide the medicinal part of the medicine from the plant. And a lot of times when you have the pleasure of looking at a full lab result of your flower, I mean, you get like a 5-page, and people like me or Doc are like, woo, this is so exciting. And you get to just see all the different terpenes, you know, the profile, what's high, what's low. It's just like a lab result of your blood, but for your plant.
it's a great way to say it.
Right.
Yeah. And I think what's important for that is consumer knowledge about and patient knowledge about what you're consuming and why, and having that on labels is important. So if I walk in and I'm looking for a specific type of cannabis for a specific condition that I have or something, then having that information on the label is going to help me as a consumer and a patient much easier than knowing, oh, it's just a, you know, Skittles Runts, you know, gelato strain, you know, so a lot of times, you know, so having that content profile would be important. So back to your point about the citizen scientists and doing that in Denver, I think that's a great idea. I know that I think Maryland has a model that could be replicated.
I remember a couple of years back, Desiree had sent me one of those sheets. And I still don't know quite how to read it, but it was really, it was nice. It was,
Yes.
you know, I had a lot of detail. I had a lot of details. And the curious George in me looked through it and thought I knew what I was looking at, but it's a lot of information. And even when you get, because folks, I'm here basically to just kind of ask the questions that maybe you don't get a chance to type, because I'm very much a lay person in this. I think it's exciting to learn about as I read more and talk. Oh, and movie night, watch Read the People on Netflix. I've been recommending it to everybody because it just gets you involved in the conversation with folks. And
How about you watch Dope Sick? How about you, seeing we're talking about opioid addiction? How about we watch Dope Sick on Hulu?
there you go.
And
There you
that's about big pharma and OxyContin addiction.
But again, you know what? Even if you don't have Hulu, folks, it's not that hard to find a video that's going to talk about the family who brought the opioids to the peak that they are. I mean, they're still dealing with legal issues. I'm calling them the family. You can find out. And just like they were speaking earlier about how the same manufacturers are making more drugs to combat the drugs that they have you hooked on. So this is a play. And quite frankly, one of my favorite lines is don't play with my emotions. And we have really got caught up in this whole situation where we're allowing our emotions to be played with, that we need to continue on this path of heavy medications.
Mhm. We have a
You know,
question from Lisa. I believe. Lisa, do you have a question?
Hi, so I just wanted to ask if somebody wanted to touch on, what else terpenes can do for you, as far as your olfactory sensories are concerned, and how medicinally important that is as well when we're talking about terpenes.
And you could probably talk about that all day too, Lisa.
Lisa, if you have, other than what Erin said, if you have information that you want to share with
Yeah,
us,
feel free to share.
please do. Yeah.
So, what I learned is one of the terpenes that mimics black pepper can be used as an antidote, a light antidote for somebody who takes in a little bit too much THC, a lot like, and so it's almost like an antidote like CBD for THC.
Interesting. And I agree. Yeah. So oftentimes, so that's an interesting point, y'all. So terpenes are found in all natural plants, right? So in lemons, there's limonene, and the same kind of terpene, limonene, is found in certain cannabis strains, right? And you make a good point, Lisa, because if you think about aromatherapy, we have lavender, we have these massages, and that's impacting our health, right? It's impacting our health through our olfactory smell. And you bring a good point, because the beta caryophyllene and the black pepper smell does have, an impact on different receptors. And this brings to the point of the complexity of cannabis, and that all these different terpenes, and back to these confusing labels, and terpenes and cannabinoids, they all impact our bodies and our smell and our health differently. So while, we may have one condition that, a strain that may make us more awake, that may make somebody with anxiety more anxious. So we need to be, really thoughtful about it. A good point about the other black pepper.
So I
Lisa.
also wanted to add too, when we're talking about, being a nurse myself, we're talking about that elderly population like Erin was talking about, and they want to talk and, take a few hits or have an edible. Sometimes, most of the time it's for sleep, anxiety, pain, but a lot of times we forget about the topicals that we can use for them that also incorporates the terpenes that still kind of can give off the same effects.
Absolutely, Lisa. And my experience has been, a lot of people don't want to smoke. A lot of people don't want to take edibles. But when I mentioned the lotion, and there are people probably in this room that have been using the lotion every time they get pain, and they swear by it. They love it. They don't have to take prescription medicine. They don't have to take Advil. And it's really, the best form of consumption if you don't want the psychoactive effects of the THC, which it's going to make you feel drowsy. So I swear by the creams, and if anyone listening wants to learn a little bit more about the terpenes, the cannabinoids, and the different ways of consumption, last month's class that we held has been recorded and is on the Cannabis Center of Excellence website, so that you guys can go in. It's about a half an hour presentation, and that presentation it's very basic, but it outlines the history of cannabis, which is cannabis. We've been using it for 6,000 years. Okay, it's only been illegal for 70 years here in this country, and so there's a stigma behind it because of those 70 years of prohibition that we're still, even this class is working on breaking down that stigma, but bringing the health back to the plants, because before this plant was prohibited here in the United States, there were about 30 medicines that were made from cannabis, and people consumed it. There was no addiction. And as soon as we made it illegal and those medicines were taken off the shelves, from that time, the 1930s to now, is when you've seen a rise in opioid and them being manufactured by pharmaceutical companies. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the basics of cannabis, go back and watch that video. But Lisa, you're absolutely right. It's amazing what the industry has been doing, and hopefully with more research and more people making different products for people depending on their ailment, you know, I really see the potential to restore the way that we're healing ourselves nowadays.
Thank you, Lisa, for that question as well as the feedback. That was amazing. I do have one last question to wrap us up. The final one is to everyone. Are you optimistic about the future of cannabis research and its impact on public health?
Well, I'd love to answer a little bit and then add a little, and then as we close out, let us remember about the doctors in the 18th and 19th century that used heroin and things of that nature. Okay, so you want to talk about addiction. Let us consider that you don't have to smoke. You can get the THC, is it A effect, without getting high if you just eat it raw or on your foods, and you'll still get the healing effects. I just wanted to share that with folks, that there are alternatives. There's so many alternatives out there to use it.
Good point. Good point. I absolutely am very positive about the movement forward of cannabis as the medicine of the people.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, Desiree, what do you think is the vision, and what are your thoughts on?
I think as more, I think as more and more states here in the United States start legalizing cannabis and medical cannabis, that, you know, it is looking bright for us on our end. You know, I see cannabis as an herb, as a healing herb. I don't see it as a substance or a drug. And I'll just share a little bit of what I learned and why that helps spark optimism in me for cannabis here in the United States. So China has been, you know, dealing with the opioid addiction for way longer than we have. Their Federal Food and Drug Administration has approved, I think, about 10 herbs to help with opioid addiction. And a lot of those herbs are being studied right now. But, you know, China has had a very long history of, you know, traditional Chinese medicine. And so that's why I think it was, you know, it's a long time coming for them. And it's something that, you know, they've been using traditional Chinese medicine to help heal opioid addiction for 200 years. So when I look at other countries and what they're doing, and I look at the speed of legalization here in the United States, you know, I am very hopeful. I am very hopeful.
Thank you for sharing that experience. You know, I think it is important to understand, back to that point of, and maybe cannabis is one part of the tool in the toolkit that could be addressed, and there are other alternatives in addition to, you know, counseling and therapy and some of the programs that are going on now. Erin, what are your thoughts?
If I didn't believe in it 100%, then I wouldn't be doing what I do. I tell you, right now I work I do all my weekends in the hospital. So I'm very much at the bedside in the clinic. And then most of my time during the week is in my gardens and seeing my cannabis patients. So 100%, has to turn around sometime, like eventually, I believe.
So we do actually have a really good final question coming from the chat from Christopher. Are you concerned by larger companies
Monopolizing.
I think, thank you, I hate
Monopolizing.
monopoly, the industry and using growing techniques that are damaging to the quality of the plant?
Well, I was bursting because I wanted to just remind folks about Speaker of the House Boehner, who was totally against marijuana, anything to do with it. But then once he left government, now he's on the board of one of the largest manufacturing, producing cannabis organizations and possibly the world. So whether it's money talks, or whether he's really considering the benefits, this is the same man who cried before the Pope. So, you know, if he's willing to open up his mind, heart, and office to the prospect and the thing, I think that we need to really be focused on it, and we as citizens need to be seriously a part of this discussion before the monopolization happens, because it's happening already.
You are so right. My company works with instruments for looking at terpenes in the product, and I have just been observing the monopolization of the industry in our state so extremely. The people coming in from all over the country, it's extreme. And although they're saying, oh yes, we're all very, local, we're all very local, we look after our people, but there's big monopolies coming in, and we really have to address that.
They're coming in from all over the world, my friend. That's the other thing, from all over the world. Where they've been using it, so they know the benefits also.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
would agree. I mean, that is a concern of having large business, and but the one of the other concerns I think also is just the reduction of the quality of the plant to the point that was made.
That is what's happened in Canada. That's what's happened in Canada. So the big companies came in and they produced it like massively, and they're all sitting on all this stuff. It's just, swank that they can't even get rid of. So that's a big problem. So, we have to focus on premium cannabis. We have to focus on local entrepreneurship. It's very important. Thank you so much for sponsoring this.
Thanks for hopping in.
Yeah, thank you for attending. Yeah, I think it's definitely concerning. I think, we need to really do a good job at supporting local cannabis establishments, because we're even, here in Massachusetts, we have the social equity program, which is helping a lot. I think we're getting, we're one of the best examples of equity in the country for cannabis, but there's still a lot of work to do. We do have to support each other, because even after all the social equity applicants are open and running, who's to say these big companies aren't gonna come in and try to damage the industry here. So we definitely have to stick together. We definitely have to advocate for people who are in this for the right reasons. There's a lot of people in cannabis. Not everybody's trying to help. Not everybody's trying to heal. And so, making sure that we're offering products that are going to help heal people, and that's not going to happen if these big companies are coming in and changing the way that they're processing the plant and damaging it. So thank you for that question. That was a really important question.
Agreed. All right, and thank you all so much. It looks like we're rounding out to our time of 7:30. We really appreciate everybody for attending, for hopping on. Thank you so much to Glorya, Erin, Desiree, and Vanessa for being wonderful, amazing leaders and part of this 3-part education series. Hope folks learned something tonight, found value out of this event. I'd like to thank Desiree again for being our program lead for this series for High Profile Bodega, for the support to make it happen. To Glorya and Erin for participation on this with us. This is the second out of 3 events, and our last event will be in December, in person this time. So our 2 virtual
Yay.
Hey, so next time, come and meet us in person. We'll post more information about it on the Cannabis Center of Excellence website, but it'll be a December 15th. And what's the address, Desiree?
1476 Dorchester Avenue. If you go on to the Cannabis Center of Excellence and register, the address is there. You can meet us in person. If anyone wants to apply to work in the cannabis industry, they can, put in their contact information. Glorya will be demoing some of the cannabis products that you would normally see at dispensaries. Erin will be there answering questions for people who need that patient care that she so awesomely gives. And Dr. Marion McNabb will be there, sharing the work that she's doing. And if anybody is interested in becoming a citizen or learning more about what the Cannabis Center of Excellence is doing, Doc will have a table there. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys. Please feel free to watch our last class, Cannabis 101. It was a very informative class, and I think it's something that you can share with friends, family, and even your neighborhood. So thanks again for coming, guys.
Let's not forget the science fair at BU on the 11th, right?
Yep. Thanks for the plug. Yeah.
December 11th.
Come out December 11th, and then you can find us December 15th. We'll be all over the place this month.
Yeah, hang out with us this December. Hang out with us.
It'll be a great time before the holidays.
All right.
All right.
Thank you all.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining.